main focus for the first section of this video is how to remove the upper chassis assembly. The upper chassis is this large component on the product here. It makes up the backbone or the spine of the machine. If you're experienced in repairing our upright products, you'll be more familiar with this part being called the duct assembly. The reason for the previous name was that this area had air ducts running along its length. On this latest product, for the first time we've removed all air ducts from external areas of the product. On this product, the air both enters and exits the bin and cyclone through the base of the bin via this area here. It's for that reason that this component is now known as the upper chassis assembly. To remove the assembly, you should start by pressing the red release catch on the top of the cyclone assembly and removing the cyclone and bin assembly from the front of the product. Whilst we've removed the cyclone and bin assemblies from the product, now is a good time to discuss some of the details around them. It's worth noting that the cyclone assembly is the area of the product that houses the pre-motor filter assembly. If a customer rings our helpline regarding an issue to either the cyclone or the bin assembly, then we will generally send the relevant part to them through the post. If, however, you've received the product into your service workshop for another reason and you find a fault with either part, it's worth noting that both parts are supplied separately. The cyclone can be separated from the bin assembly by pressing the same red button as previously, which opens the bin base and also exposes a silver button on the rear of the cyclone. By pressing a button, you can then separate the bin assembly. The bin assembly is only offered as one complete assembly and therefore includes the bin, the red push rod, the bin base and both seals. The cyclone assembly, however, is not offered in the configuration shown here. The cyclone assembly is the area of the product that houses the pre-motor filter assembly. The filter is offered as a separate part and is separate from the rest of the cyclone assembly. The clear handle on the top of the cyclone assembly is also offered as a separate assembly away from the cyclone assembly and can be easily detached just by removing from the hinge points on the rear. If you order a cyclone assembly, it will arrive in this configuration. The next component to remove is the wand assembly, which is this red component here and is separate from this component, which is the wand handle assembly. Release the mains power cord from the rear of the wand assembly, lift up the wand catch and then slide the red tube away from the wand handle assembly. Then press the red wand release button in the top of the hose cuff and slide the wand fully out of the hose assembly. With the wand assembly removed, you can then remove the hose assembly. Press the red release button on the base of the upper chassis and then firmly pull the hose away from the product, noting that the lower cable winder is not attached to the hose, so you just pull the hose by the hose itself. And then the final component to remove out of the way is the wand handle assembly. Slide it up as far as you can and then press the red release button on the front of the product, keep it held in, and then press the small black release button on the rear, then remove the wand handle assembly. With all those parts removed, you've then exposed 4 screws in the rear of the upper chassis. Simply remove all 4 using the Torx T15 screwdriver. All 4 screws are identical and they're each 10mm in length. There are no catches to release. The 4 screws are the only fixings that attach the switch housing onto the upper chassis. So once those screws are removed, just gently ease the housing away from the chassis, but before you pull it away too far, just remove the red release catch and the spring from the housing. On some of our more recent products, when removing the upper chassis or duct assembly, it was necessary to disconnect the internal power cord assembly from the switches first. On this product, it's not necessary to do that. It is worth noting at this stage though, that the switch housing on this product is a lot more complex than previous Dyson products. And if you're not careful, and if you inadvertently press either of the buttons, then some components can disconnect from the housing. Therefore, at this stage, I would strongly recommend that you fit at least one of the screws in this area here to hold the switch housing into the switch cover to avoid that happening. With the switch housing secured, you can then carefully release the internal power cord from the release catches down the length of the upper chassis. There are a total of 6 Torx T15 screws that attach the upper chassis to the product. The first 2 being in the front of the upper chassis here. All 6 screws are 16mm in length. The next 2 screws are on the rear of the product and sit underneath the lower cable winder, which can be removed by simply pushing forwards. The last 2 screws sit on the underside of the product in these areas here. To access them, you have to remove this component, which is the tool holder first. To remove it, slide a flat-bladed screwdriver between the tool holder and the upper chassis, and then just prise it away. To access the screws, it's also necessary to recline the product first. Then turn it over and then remove the 2 screws. And then with all 6 screws removed, the upper chassis can just be carefully prised away from the motor bucket. Now we've removed the upper chassis, there's a couple of quick points to note. And one is that when you come to fit a new chassis, you'll notice that it comes as a single component. There are no parts attached to it. So therefore, it's necessary at this point to remove the wand release catch from the existing chassis and fit to the new. This can easily be done just by prising out with a thin flat-bladed screwdriver.